When Zariah Cole steps into Redwood Grove High, she's just the new girl. Until her flawless cheer stunt sets the school ablaze with envy. Whispers turn to sabotage, a hidden camera, a threat in her locker, and a legacy no one saw coming. But what the bullies don't know: her father is Big Shaq, and silence isn't in their playbook anymore. This fall, the cheer captain falls, the truth rises, and Redwood will never be the same. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel, and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. The sun climbed gently over the manicured lawns of Redwood Grove. As the school bus lumbered down Oakside Drive, its windows reflected the valley of neat front yards, trimmed hedges, and blooming petunias lining each driveway. When the bus doors hissed open, Zariah Cole stepped onto the concrete, her sneakers landing firmly in the morning light. She exhaled slowly, scanning the crowd of waiting students, feeling their eyes flicker across her poised frame. She wore confidence like armor, the quiet certainty of someone who'd faced far harsher landscapes. Still, the stares carried weight, curiosity, skepticism, and the unmistakable edge of judgment. For Zariah, this was just another day in another town. But to the students of Redwood Grove High, she was a new element in their carefully balanced ecosystem. A tall, athletic black girl, with a determined chin and a soft smile that hinted at stories untold. Her homecoming from the bus felt less like a rival and more like a statement. She belonged, and she had purpose. When she walked through the front doors, her presence changed the texture of the hallway. Locker slams dimmed, hushed whispers hovered, and a group of girls by the trophy case exchanged glances. "Who's that?" someone murmured, just loud enough to reach her ears. She kept walking, letting the question float unanswered. It didn't matter. Redwood Grove needed its new chapter, and Zariah had just signed the first page. Next came the tryouts for the cheer squad. Inside the gym, American flags and banners draped the walls, reflecting the sunlight on polished hardwood floors. The bleachers were partly filled with eager current squad members and teachers scouting for talent. Zariah paused at the entrance, her fist gently closing around her duffel strap. She met the gaze of Coach Stevens, a stern woman with a clipboard of names and expectations. When Zariah introduced herself, clear, soft, yet unapologetic, Coach Stevens blinked once, then nodded. The stopwatch in her hand ticked its way toward fate. Zariah began stretching, uncurling muscles honed by years of practice, discipline, and need. She didn't wait for permission or explanation. She catapulted into jumps that seemed to defy gravity, her voice rising in perfect synchrony with each stunt call. Tumbling, extension, liberty. She executed them all, with effortless control. The gym fell quiet as feet hit the hardwood in rhythmic cadence. Then she broke Mother Nature's law again. She stuck the landing, and the floor seemed to whisper in amazement. Applause drifted in measured bursts. Not everyone clapped. Some watched, calculating. She smoothed her ponytail back, turned to Coach Stevens, and waited. The clipboard was heavy with names, scribbles, crossouts. The coach tapped at it, her eyes unreadable. Zariah breathed in, held, then let out. "We'll let you know," the coach announced. No smile, no welcome, just a promise wrapped in vagueness. Zariah nodded, packed her bag methodically, and left the gym with nothing shaken, nothing lost. The silence that followed her was not pity. It was intrigue, even admiration. But beneath the polished veneer, something deeper simmered, the question they couldn't voice loud enough to make sense of. Back in the locker room, she found a bench and unzipped her bag. She pulled out a framed photograph, herself as a child, standing beside her father, Cheerleader Big Shaq O'Neal. He towered over her, grin wide, holding her small hand. The photo was her secret shield. No one needed to know who his daughter was yet. She slid that armor back into her bag and replaced it with lip gloss and a comb. Appearances mattered, but her story, that stayed locked away. Later that afternoon, she walked the crowded halls again. This time as a statistic, students hustled past, their laughter echoing off fluorescent lights. She passed by Brielle Hastings, the freshman captain, radiant in her custom cheer warm-up, stepping under the neon scoreboard glow. Brielle's eyes flicked to Zariah, tight smile, evaluating. Then she turned back, chatting with her clique. A sharp laugh bounced off the lockers. Zariah kept walking. This was no wall. It was a minefield. She navigated it with the deliberate grace of someone who knew how to survive. Her first class was pre-calculus with Mr. Daniels, a gentle older teacher with salt and pepper hair. He introduced her to the class and smiled warmly. "Zariah, welcome," he said. The class turned. No one raised their hand with questions. She sat down, opened her notebook and settled in. The lesson began. Algebraic functions didn't care about background or race. Numbers could be kind like that. By lunchtime, the cafeteria hummed with the usual chaotic symphony of clattering trays, booming televisions, and adolescent chatter. To the left of the entrance sat the cheer squad, at the long table shaped like a capital C. They were a unit perfectly styled, tightly bound. Zariah felt the gravitational pull of her classmates' tables. She walked to the far side, sat with 3 others who they'd told would let her sit. One was shy, one curious, the third neutral. They introduced themselves quietly. She remained reserved, measured, no oversharing, no over-smiling. She let them ask the questions they thought they wanted answers to. Favorite subject, hometown, music preferences. She delivered brief, honest answers. Then the bell rang. That evening, the hush of the neighborhood held its breath. Zariah's new bedroom sat on the second floor of their modest, yet cozy house. Its small window overlooked the row of identical houses, each a whispering testament to suburban conformity. She carried in her suitcase, unpacked neatly, and made her bed with precision. She laid the photo on her nightstand, set her phone beside it, and did not pick up her laptop. Digital worlds could wait. Real ones were more urgent. On the mantel below, 2 trophies glinted, past victories from middle school cheer competitions. She paused at them, then pressed her palm against the glass. They were proof of her promise, but they were history now. New ground meant new tests, new stakes. She flicked off the lamp, slid under the cover, and closed her eyes. Tomorrow would hurt, but hurting was better than hiding. Day 2 dawned icy bright. The air inside Redwood Grove High felt sharper than the morning chill. Zariah moved through the corridors like a calm storm, steady, promising rain but not yet breaking. She'd been promised a call about tryouts. Nothing came. She didn't press. Confidence, not desperation, guided her. During third period gym class, the cheer squad arrived for warm-ups. Brielle's eyes found Zariah's. She smiled, sugar sweet. "Good job yesterday," she said aloud enough for half the class to hear. Zariah paused mid-jump in dodgeball practice. "Thank you," she said, voice smooth. Applause from Brielle's following. Zariah offered a nod, returned to the game. But later, when passing by the bleachers, she saw the scoreboard alone. In bold felt letters, "Welcome not, just that, WELCOME space, NOT, painted black on white poster board." She stood for a moment, then she kept walking, her heartbeat even. After class, Cassian Grant, a tall, slender boy with rimmed glasses and a camera strap slung over his shoulder, intercepted her by the lockers. She noticed the micro detail, the weight of his gaze, the tilt of his head. He said quietly, "Hey, are you okay?" She met his eyes, found softness, maybe empathy. She nodded. "If you want to talk or need help, just let me know." His words floated, no pity, just offer. She said, "Thank you, I'll keep that in mind." Inside the classroom, the afternoon bell rang, and Zariah's thoughts floated home. She'd had a good morning. No confrontation, no embarrassment. But the message in the gym stayed lodged. When she saw her father's photo across her phone screen, as he texted "First day done," she hit reply with a single word, "Yes." She didn't add more. He didn't need more. His replies were few. Rest. Tomorrow's chance. The next day, during cheer tryout callbacks, Zariah showed up again in the gym. Coach Stevens handed her a list of routines. Zariah's heart didn't race. It steadied. She moved through the flips, lifts and team stunts. Brielle stood behind her, arms crossed. Again, applause followed. Again, nothing else. When she packed her bag, a reminder pinged on her phone. School email. She opened it. Subject, cheer tryouts. Body, congratulations Zariah. Welcome to the squad. She let the words settle before she allowed a thin, almost trembling smile. The gym felt charged, as if the air between rafters hummed with new possibility. Brielle looked over from a distance. Jealousy's cool shadow fell. That evening, Zariah walked home under the glow of streetlights. Cars pulled into driveways. The scent of grilled dinners drifted. She felt, for the first time, the uncertain balance between triumph and cost. She unlocked the door. Her father stood in the kitchen, cutting fruit. He looked miles younger than his legend, more real than the millions watching him. He didn't ask what happened. He simply held 2 slices of melon, handed one to her. She leaned against the counter, half turned away, and let her war-scarred smile meet his. "I made it," she said, quietly. He nodded, slicing the fruit in silence. No speech, no applause. She knew he'd fought harder battles on courts, against prejudice, on bus rides. But this was hers. Their smiles met, small but strong. Then he spoke. "Be yourself. That's all they need to see." By Friday morning, Redwood Grove felt different under Zariah's footsteps. She crossed campus, aligning herself with the rhythm of school life. But she carried a secret. Her father's world had shaped her quiet rebellion. In English class, she cited Maya Angelou for a poem. In science, she asked about gender representation in STEM. Her hands shot up like flares. Teachers responded differently to her questions. She asked them differently. When lunchtime came, she didn't go to the cheer table or the separate group. She began a new table. Cassie and 2 non-cheer athletes she'd met, and a girl in the art club. Their conversations wove through homework, heritage, music, easy and honest. Laughter bubbled, where silence had once hovered. Brielle's party seated nearby, stiffened, eyes narrowing, but their words lost focus. Zariah's table gained the spotlight it deserved. The school bell rang again and again. Classes, corridors, performances, smiles. Through it all, Zariah carried the weight of stares that didn't see her achievements. They only saw differences. Yet with every cheer, tryout stunt, every voice raised in classroom dialogue, and every friendship sparked over sandwiches, she dismantled them quietly, elegantly. That afternoon, the stadium sat silent as she mounted the bleachers. The entire cheer team practiced for the first football game in 2 weeks. Under the scarlet sky, the final light dipped. The stands stretched empty but ready. Coach Stevens called formation. As the sun sank, Zariah flew. Basket toss, tumbling passes, spirited smiles. The squad fell in step behind her momentum. At the end, Coach Stevens studied her, nodded twice. The gym mirror reflected the body of a stranger, one who embodied grace and strength. Zariah breathed in the dusk. She felt the weight of the town's gaze, but she no longer carried doubt. She stood taller than any cheerleader had a right to. In that moment, and when she looked toward the streetlights rising over empty bleachers, she saw possibility, not permission. That night, the Cole household was silent, except for distant crickets. Zariah placed another photo on her nightstand, the cheer team announcement email. She studied it, flicked the small print with her finger. This chapter was hers now. Her father's legacy had opened the door. She'd opened it herself. The night waited patiently for her dreams, for the battles to come, for the whisper-turned voice of truth in Redwood Grove. Tomorrow she would walk those halls again. She would face the war of whispers, of stares, and challenge every underestimation. She would carry her father's courage, but claim her own strength. The town would learn her name, not just as Big Shaq's daughter, but as Zariah Cole. Renaissance in motion, justice in quiet power, and the promise of change with each cheer she performed. And that was just the beginning. It started not with shouts but with glances. Those sharp, quiet exchanges that skipped across the hallway like stones over water. Zariah had made the cheer team. Official. Her name was printed beneath the familiar roster. Same font, same size, but it might as well have been in bold flames for the way it burned through the Redwood Grove ecosystem. She had earned her place through skill, not politics. But in a school like this, where legacy lingered in lockers and family names decided friendships, skill was never enough. In the days that followed, the temperature changed, not the weather. Redwood Grove still glistened with its curated perfection, but the social climate cooled. Zariah noticed it in the weight of the silences during stretches, in how the other girls formed their lines without her, how conversations paused when she entered. Brielle Hastings, the captain with her blonde braid and glossy lip stain, kept her tone professional, pleasant, even. But every compliment felt like a leash. Every great job Zariah was followed by a tighter circle of whispers she was never invited into. There were no overt slurs, no locker slams, just erosion, a steady, calculated chipping away at her presence. It began with positioning. Zariah placed at the edges during warm-ups, subtly excluded from key stunts. Brielle claimed it was rotational fairness. Then came critiques masked as coaching. You're a bit too sharp on that dismount. Let's dial the energy down. Don't want to look too aggressive. That face less serious. More school spirit. Yeah? Phrases that clung like smoke. Group chats buzzed behind screens. The Grove girls' Snapchat was their sanctuary, where filters softened faces and sharpened venom. Zariah wasn't in it, of course, but the screenshots found their way to her. Eventually, Brielle's comment, "She's just not Grove material. Too intense, not our vibe." Another girl added, "She's not even that good. Just flashy." A sticker of a trophy with a cracked base followed. The real sting wasn't the insults. It was the silence from others, girls who smiled in person, posed beside her for photos, and said nothing as she was slowly erased from the inside out. At first, Zariah considered confronting Brielle, but then she remembered what her father always told her. Sometimes the loudest thing you can do is not speak. Just move smarter. So she watched. Listen. She started noticing the choreography, off-balance formations whenever she led a stunt. Extra corrections only she received. Suggestions that she sit out certain segments to rotate in others. Brielle framed every choice in fairness and strategy. But Zariah saw the blueprint. Make her feel temporary. Make her question herself. She didn't break. Not yet. She adjusted instead. Flawless landings. Tighter routines. Controlled enthusiasm. She took note of who stayed silent when unfairness unfolded. She filed names away. And she grew quieter, not out of fear but focus. Meanwhile, in the background of her days, her father lingered like a lighthouse. Ever present, unmoving, guiding. Big Shaq had become Redwood Grove's phantom celebrity. Parents whispered when he appeared at school events. Teachers softened their tone around him. But Shaquille didn't perform. He sat at the back, nodded politely, and left without fanfare. His daughter had a life to lead, a fight to navigate. He gave her room. Watched her walk into battles he recognized all too well. One afternoon, Zariah found herself alone in the gym, earlier than usual. The lights hadn't fully warmed up, and the floor gleamed under the buzz of the overheads. She practiced quietly, just her and the echo of her sneakers. That's when she noticed Brielle entering, phone in hand, not seeing her at first. A call connected. Brielle laughed. "She's just exhausting. Like everything she does is just extra. I swear if coach gives her captain next year, I'm transferring." Pause. A voice replied on the other end, too muffled to understand. Brielle scoffed. "She's not even from here. Her dad's some retired NBA guy. Thinks that gives her the right to walk in and own the place." Zariah didn't flinch. She moved to the far end of the gym, making her presence known with a deliberate thud of her duffel bag. Brielle spun around. Her expression tightened, but she forced a smile. "Hey Z, practicing early?" Zariah nodded, her face unreadable. "Always room to improve. Right?" Brielle faltered for a half beat. "Right. That's the spirit." She left shortly after. Zariah stayed, stretching until the ache in her limbs matched the weight in her chest. At school, the campaign against her turned digital. Subtle memes circulated. None used her name, but the captions were familiar. "When someone thinks one flip makes them captain," or "Grove isn't a runway." Posts vanished within hours, but the message lingered. Zariah responded with silence, but inside a war brewed. She wasn't fragile. She was built for this. Her whole life had been a quiet rebellion. But even rebels get tired. Her grades stayed high. Teachers noticed her discipline, her insight, her hunger to do more than exist. She raised her hand in class, joined after-school tutoring for younger students, volunteered at the community center, all without announcement. She wasn't performing. She was building roots. One evening, she found herself sitting on the porch, scrolling through her texts. None from cheer squad. Not even coach. Her father joined her, silent. He offered her a sandwich, sat beside her without filling the air with platitudes. Then, after a moment, he spoke. "You know what I used to do when I couldn't control the crowd?" he said, voice low. Zariah looked up. "What?" "I dominated the game. Not for them. For me. Let them boo. Let them whisper. But when that scoreboard lights up, they don't have a choice. Respect ain't asked for. It's earned. And when it's earned, they can't take it." Zariah nodded, her throat tight. She didn't need his rescue. But his belief? That meant everything. Days passed, weeks even. The whispers didn't stop. If anything, they evolved. She's too serious. She doesn't party. She's always watching. Zariah wore their discomfort like armor. She took it all in stride, until one morning, a flyer appeared on her locker. A fake cheer camp poster, photoshopped with her face and the title Future of Flops. In Comic Sans, no less. Juvenile. Still, it hit hard. She peeled it off slowly, folding it once, then again, and placed it into her folder without a word. She walked into first period, eyes steady, but the ache had settled deep. Later that week, Cassian Grant approached her again. The boy with the camera and observant eyes. He had watched, noted, captured. He offered her a seat beside him in the library. She said, "I've been documenting bias at Grove for a while," he said softly. "You're not the first, but you might be the loudest proof without ever saying a word." Zariah studied him. "And what do you plan to do with it?" "Not sure yet, but I won't do anything without your okay." She nodded. He didn't ask for more. They just studied together after that. Quietly. By the time midterms rolled around, Zariah had found her rhythm. The squad didn't like her, but they couldn't ignore her. Her routines were cleaner, her stunts stronger. Coach Stevens rarely criticized anymore, just watched with narrowed eyes, as if unsure whether to defend her or keep the peace. The system didn't intervene. Complaints didn't surface. No suspensions. Just passive acceptance. And that, in its own way, was the loudest injustice. But Zariah understood now. The game wasn't fairness. It was endurance. Grace under siege. Fire without smoke. She carried herself differently, not as a victim, but as a storm in waiting. At night, her father cooked dinner while ESPN flickered in the background. Sometimes old clips of his games surfaced, crowds roaring, his dominance on full display. Zariah watched from the kitchen counter, then looked at her own reflection in the microwave door. She didn't need to be him, but she understood him more now. Not just the fame, the loneliness, the cost. By the end of the semester, she was still standing unbent, unreadable. And Brielle, her grip was slipping. Coach started asking Zariah's opinion in meetings. Parents began cheering louder when Zariah performed. And the other squad members, they weren't friends, but some had started to offer small acknowledgments. A nod, a nice job, small cracks in the cold front. But the whisper network hadn't died. It had only gone quiet, waiting, watching, planning its next move. And Zariah? She had learned the power of that silence. It would be her greatest weapon yet. Long before the stadiums, before the endorsements, before the name Big Shaq echoed through the rafters, there was a boy named Shaquille, tall even then, quiet by nature, and born into the red clay heartbeat of Newark, New Jersey, before his family moved south. The 1970s painted the country in uneasy tones. Change was promised, but never fully delivered. He learned quickly that skin color wasn't just pigment, it was permission denied, doors unopened, and stares that didn't blink. Shaquille's early years were laced with silent battles. He remembered his mother Lucille standing in the kitchen with shoulders like iron, humming gospel beneath her breath as she packed his school lunch. She never explained racism. She didn't need to. The bruises the world left behind told their own story. His stepfather, an army sergeant, believed in discipline and steel-spine dignity. Be bigger than what they expect, then be better, he would say, tapping the kitchen table like a war drum. Shaquille took that lesson and grew in body, in patience, in quiet resolve. Basketball came later, almost by accident. He didn't chase it for fame. He chased it for space. Room to move, room to breathe. A court that didn't care if your skin was dark, as long as your aim was true. The sound of the ball on concrete was his metronome, his calm. He grew tall fast, clumsy at first, then terrifyingly graceful. Coaches leaned in. Scouts began whispering his name. But what they didn't see was the boy who'd been benched, not for fouls but for being too dominant. The coded language of fear dressed as fairness. Still, he didn't fight it out loud. He played harder. By the time Shaquille reached college, his name had grown larger than his shadow. LSU turned him into a phenomenon. The NBA made him a myth. He played with power, with joy, with precision. Reporters called him a beast, a machine, a force. They rarely called him thoughtful, spiritual, soft-hearted, but he was all those things. He cracked jokes in post-game interviews, because humor was his smokescreen. He signed every autograph with care, because he remembered what it felt like to be ignored. Behind the scenes, he bought groceries for strangers, paid for funerals he wasn't invited to, and mentored kids in neighborhoods that America forgot. Then came love. Real, imperfect, breathtaking. Her name was Amara. She wasn't impressed by his height, or his salary, or his stats. She challenged him to slow down, to look inward, to understand that strength wasn't just how many points you could rack up, but how deeply you could listen when someone you loved cried at midnight. Together they carved out a life that felt like balance. They welcomed Zariah into that life with trembling hands and wide smiles. Parenthood changed him, not overnight, but like rain slowly shaping stone. He learned lullabies, memorized baby formula labels, and rocked her to sleep while mouthing old Motown songs off beat. Then the silence came. Amara's diagnosis crept in like a shadow on a clear day. Unwelcome, unrelenting. Cancer doesn't ask for permission. It just takes. By the time they realized the scale of the battle, it was already too late for victory. Shaka stayed by her side. Every treatment, every sleepless night, every desperate hope. When she died, he didn't cry in public. Not once. The media speculated, called it stoicism. They didn't see the tears that soaked Zariah's baby blanket at 2 a.m., long after the world stopped watching. He raised Zariah alone from that point forward. Not with riches. Those came easy. But with intention. He walked her to school when he could have sent a driver. He packed her lunch with crooked sandwiches and too many snacks. He cheered from the bleachers, not the VIP boxes. He taught her to dribble, to lead, and to listen harder than she spoke. He told her stories, not just about basketball, but about what it meant to be underestimated, misjudged, and misunderstood. He made her memorize James Baldwin, not just the names of NBA legends. As she grew, so did her fire. She was different from him, leaner, sharper, more outspoken, but their souls beat to the same rhythm. When Zariah faced injustice, she didn't shout, but her eyes told entire novels. He recognized the look. He'd seen it in the mirror. Shaquille never tried to protect her from the world. He knew better. Instead, he armed her with truth, with strategy, with silence that echoed louder than words. He taught her that legacy wasn't a thing you inherited. It was a thing you earned by waking up every day and deciding not to bend. In Redwood Grove, he became the invisible protector. Parents knew his name, teachers remembered his stats, but he didn't flaunt it. He drove an unassuming SUV, wore sweatshirts over designer suits, nodded respectfully at every crossing guard. When he came to Zariah's games, he clapped like every other parent. No entourage, no spotlight, just presence. Unmovable, undeniable. He knew what was happening behind the scenes. The gossip, the coded comments, the shifting choreography. He saw the bruises that weren't on her body, but in her spirit. He didn't storm the school. He didn't call the coach. Instead, he sat her down and reminded her who she was. Not his daughter, but her own person. Fierce, prepared, worthy. And when she left the house each morning, he stood by the window, watching her walk away. Not because he doubted her, but because he respected the battlefield she was walking into. The world had tried to break him with racism, with ridicule, with rejection. It failed. Now it was testing her. And though his hands stayed out of the fight, his heart stayed in it. The quiet giant had become a father not just of a daughter, but of a legacy that would outlive dunks and trophies. Zariah didn't need to wear his number. She carried something far more valuable. His unshakable belief that love, presence, and restraint could be stronger than any roar. In the silence of their home, in the moments between meals and memories, Shaquille O'Neal built something no stadium ever held. A fortress of strength, made not from stone, but from story. His story, her story, their legacy. Zariah moved through another day at Redwood Grove High, with her usual quiet resolve, carrying the remnants of the Whisper network in her chest, like an anchor. But beneath her poise, the atmosphere felt thicker now, an undercurrent of suspicion, of watching eyes. It was during a late practice under the bleachers that she discovered it, a small camera, nestled in the dark space behind the stands, its lens pointed outward to capture the squad's routines. She froze at the sight, every instinct screaming that this was personal. Someone was plotting against her, not merely excluding her, but weaponizing her own image in a calculated attempt to sabotage her. The memory of discovering that camera remains vivid. The thin beam of afternoon sun slipping between bleacher slats, spotlighting the tiny lens like an accusing eye. Her heart pounded, but her face remained calm. She knelt and studied it without touching it. Red blink. Recording. She realized it was meant to catch a misstep, a tumble, maybe catch her mid-flaw. It wasn't just sabotage, it was ambush. She had been building momentum, earning her place, and suddenly felt her foundation threatened by a hidden lens. But there was no hysteria, no confrontation, just quiet awareness. She removed the camera and slipped it into her duffel, her mind shifting from shock to strategy. That night, in the dim glow of her room, she set the camera on her desk. The blinking light paused. It looked like a small, helpless creature. Her father's picture sat next to it, and she sighed. This wasn't the war he'd told her to prepare for. This was something quieter, darker. She deleted the footage, purged the files, and returned the camera to the bag. The evidence had to disappear for now. She couldn't let this define her or darken her spirit. Her battle would be waged with truth, not scandal, with strategy, not revenge. Her silent shift didn't go unnoticed. Cassian Grant, the quiet journalist she'd noticed weeks earlier, approached her in the library the next day, his notebook and camera baggage an extension of himself. He showed up at the table where she usually ate, hovered for a second, and nodded. She nodded back. No fear, no apology. Cassian slid into the seat and pulled out a small notebook, leaving space between them. He didn't waste time. I found more than whispers, he said, voice even. That camera. I saw you pull it out from your bag. She exhaled slowly. She hadn't told him anything yet. She studied him, reading trust in his eyes. I saved it, he continued. Not footage, but the device. I don't know whose it is, but I know you didn't plant it. And I've got audio from the sideline. Someone was giving instructions to record your mistakes. She felt herself nod, a careful currency of agreement. He opened his laptop and handed it to her. On the screen were grainy sideline videos, long zooms, glimpses of faces behind the camera, muffled coach talk, probably Brielle's voice, or someone mimicking. Zariah's expression remained thoughtful. Why help? She asked. Cassian looked at her directly. Because fairness matters. Not everything needs to be in the spotlight. Some truths matter even if they're buried. He stopped, then added quietly. And because I see you. 2 days later they met again. This time behind the bleachers, just before sunset. Zariah carried the camera in her bag. Cassian held a recorder. They walked the tight spaces until Cassian paused and pointed at the place Zariah discovered the device. A pressure plate, 2 discarded bolts nearby, damage from clumsy removal. Cassian set the recorder. Zariah spoke without emotion. They want me to slip. They want to catch me failing. Pause. I won't let that happen. She looked at him. But they need to be exposed. Cassian nodded. Pressed record. Later the recorder caught more than her voice. It caught their resolve, their plan. They would document microaggressions. They would collect screenshots of group chats, save the fake flyers, note covert messages left in lockers. Their pact was simple. No physical confrontations, no slander, just truth. Transparent, undeniable public. Zariah's rules: keep school reputation intact, expose tactics, level the playing field. The following morning, Brielle posted a celebration of their cheer squad on Instagram. No group photo, just a cropped image of herself, with her followers gushing in comments. Zariah noticed someone anonymously commented, "Too many flashes." Then another, "Who's that girl?" The snippet was captured and logged. She and Cassian scheduled their first meeting that evening at the local library, away from school walls. They spoke quietly, systematically, logging evidence in Cassian's laptop, time-stamped screenshots, voice clips, camera specs of the hidden device. Zariah didn't speak of anger, just observation. The days that followed felt electric. Every comment, every exclusion, every staged critique was catalogued. Cassian took still images from leaked storyboards, compiled audio of overheard coaches' instructions, request to keep an eye on Zariah, code for filming. Zariah adjusted, doing routines perfectly, smiling brighter, standing stronger. They didn't confront the coaches or threaten lawsuits. They planned a reveal, an anonymous report directly to the superintendent, and a public dossier. Roast them with facts. Let the echoes expose toxins. At home, Zariah's father noticed her late-night routines. He didn't question her, but he sat with her after dinner, listened as she described the camera removal, the pact with Cassian. He didn't respond with anger, only interest. He asked about the cameras in press conferences, about protocols in school board meetings, about strategy. He asked to see Cassian's organized folder. Only then did his proud smile emerge. His silent approval, quiet but firm, was all the encouragement Zariah needed. Meanwhile, the Whisper network tightened. Rumors surged. Zariah was planning to sue. She was out for fame. She leaked footage to ESPN. False. But the rumors triggered more scrutiny. Brielle and her clique wore nervous edges. They started rehearsing cheer routines with overcompensation, angry smiles, glaring stares. Zariah practiced with effortless calm. She wasn't the target anymore. She was the center. One afternoon, Cassian texted her, "Meeting tonight. My place. I have the final version." They met at an old Gilbert house turned studio space next door to his house. The basement was dim, but orderly. Cassian brought tea. He opened his laptop and played a montage, the covert camera clip, the audio of sideline instructions, screenshots of chat messages, the fake poster, the repeated slights. Zariah watched her story constructed in pixels and sound. It was powerful. Not for insult, but for clarity. Every dishonesty laid bare. Tension hung in the room. She took a deep breath and said, "This is us. No slander, just proof." He nodded. They renamed the file Redwood Truth. They decided on next steps. Cassian would submit to the superintendent and to the school newspaper as anonymous whistleblower. Zariah would file a formal complaint, but quietly let the evidence speak. They had no illusions about immediate change, but their goal was permanent record, accountability, deterrent. They agreed this would be the moment that defined the rest of her time here. That evening, Zariah tallied the potential fallouts. Rumors could bounce back. Friends who stayed silent, would they be safe from backlash? Cassian said, "There's safety in truth, even if it shakes the walls." They printed sealed copies of the dossier and delivered them to secure inboxes. The next morning, Redwood Grove awakened to whispers again. But a different tone. Parents checked their phones. Teachers exchanged anxious looks. Brielle's captain status felt unstable. Coach Stevens arrived early. Brows knitted. She scanned the hallway, spotted Zariah, narrowed her gaze, but didn't say a word. By lunchtime, the superintendent's email had hit all school accounts. An investigation has been launched regarding allegations of covert recordings and targeted harassment. Attached is the initial report. The words spread like ripples. Zariah sat with Cassian in the back corner of the cafeteria, their eyes silent. Around them, conversations shifted. Some congratulated. Some questioned their motives. Some stayed painfully silent. Zariah reached over, squeezed Cassian's shoulder. He smiled, but his eyes betrayed relief. Their pact had begun shifting Redwood Grove's story. Back under the bleachers that evening, Zariah returned to the place she'd found the camera. Cassian followed, metadata in hand. She knelt and placed a pink ribbon, a symbol of her mother's fight and the quiet battles they both understood, around the bleacher leg. A silent statement. This was no longer hidden. It was named, remembered, unburied. In the silent glow of sunset, she glanced up at the stands. No roar from a crowd. But in that quiet space, she felt victory. Not for herself, but for everyone who had to risk being seen. That night, as she lay in bed, Zariah didn't need to sleep. She needed firm resolve, clearer purpose. Tomorrow would bring investigations, meetings, more whispers. But now she had allies, evidence, strategy. The war had shifted. She wasn't fighting hidden cameras anymore. She was demanding light. And every shadow she uncovered increased the dawn that was coming. Homecoming week arrived at Redwood Grove High like a finely tuned orchestra. Each rehearsal, pep rally, and parade moving in crisp, orchestrated harmony. Yet beneath the choreographed smiles and school spirit chants, tension simmered, an undercurrent that pulled tighter when Zariah Cole walked through the halls. Her presence was no longer subtle. She had become the centerpiece of anticipation, whispering rumors and nervous anticipation. Brielle Hastings, the cheer captain, framed her moves well, every smile, every word repositioned like pieces on a chessboard. And this week she planned her checkmate, the halftime stunt. The school had engineered the homecoming game to be the biggest in years. A sold-out bleachers crowd, a marching band that spilled out onto the field, and a weather forecast promising the perfect late September evening. Zariah stepped onto the field with the squad, heart steady, muscles primed. Parents lined the sidelines, cameras ready, their hopes threading through the crisp nighttime air. The routine began synchronized tumbling, precise arm motions, spins, and for Zariah, each movement was a declaration of her right to stand there, center stage. Then came the stunt basket toss, into a full extension. Everyone from coaches to teammates watched her explode upward, arms stretching like wings. She hovered for a moment, like an icon suspended in night sky. When she landed clean, arms raised, eyes gleaming, the stadium erupted. Thousands of applauses, flashes snapping bright. Brielle's jaw tightened as she took a breath, but the spotlight remained on Zariah. What no one saw were the delicate chains tightening behind it all. Brielle had orchestrated the stunt call. Its timing, its rhythm. Knowing there would be minimal rehearsal, she'd fed rumors to the ESPN correspondent invited for coverage, whispering that Zariah might burn out in the spotlight. She'd leaned on coaches, engineered little hesitations, deployed subtle coaching suggestions to disorient Zariah. On the field it felt effortless, but backstage she hovered, her friends poised for impact. And when everything seemed to go well, when applause washed over the stadium like a wave, something still lingered. In the locker room, air thick with sweat and excitement, Zariah heard it, a whisper close enough to tickle her eardrum. "You don't belong here." The voice was vaguely familiar, the rasp of Brielle's tone, the edge of someone behind her. Zariah did not flinch. She folded her arms over her chest, breathing in the clang of metal lockers, the slap of water bottle caps, hurried congratulations from teammates. Unaware of the darkness buried beneath her skin, she refused to respond. She carried grief with her, but negotiating cruelty wasn't part of her skill set. She waited for another whisper, but the room fell silent again. Sometime later that afternoon, Zariah leaned against her locker, towel draped around her shoulders, still riding the crescendo of her performance. The locker next to hers swung open, and a folded paper slipped inside. The fingers of the note were quick, secretive. No one watched. Zariah tugged it free. Inside was a neatly folded newspaper clipping, yellowed at the edges, a front-page story from years ago. The headline read, "Local woman dies in mysterious house fire." The photo? Zariah's mother, young and bright-eyed, clad in protest gear. It was her mom's photo from the night she died in a blaze that robbed them both. The caption detailed an article about her mother's activism and fiery demise. Words like danger, radical, activist, printed large. This wasn't random. Someone had looked, found it, and delivered it with gravity. Zariah felt bile rise. This was threat. This was extraction of her pain. She didn't cry in public. She folded the clipping precisely and slid it into her locker's secret compartment. She returned her gaze to her reflection in the hallway mirror. Too strong to break but hurt lodged between ribs. Behind her surface calm, a storm gathered. She knew now that the war had escalated beyond stunt sabotage into psychological territory. She would not respond with panic, but she would not remain silent. The rest of homecoming night blurred into neon lights, homecoming royalty applause, and dancing under glittering gym-festooned banners. Zariah attended, smiling for photos, embracing her friends, risking her anguish behind practiced calm. Parents asked about routines. Cassian approached her between dances, his eyes steady. He had pineapple juice in his hand, and slipped her a note. "Let me go through that clipping with you. I'll find its origin." She nodded. Trusting Cassian was mission critical. He didn't shy away from documents. He had learned the value of truth over ambiguity. The homecoming week slid into Friday morning. Zariah found Cassian in the media lab. The clipping on the scanner. He touched the edges. This was from the East Valley Post, 2 years ago. It related to some community protest. She was burning a pile of leaf litter, and something caught. He paused. No mention of foul play, no investigation. Zariah nodded, absorbing the silence. She flipped through old digital archives, noting the lack of follow-ups. It smelled like hush. She emerged from the lab with the document folder, pressed against her chest. She didn't feel like a victim. She felt a strategist sharpening her edge. The pieces lined up, stunt set up, whispers in locker rooms, threats hitting her locker days later. Would Redwood Grove's system act? Would the superintendent act? She planned to find out, but first she would walk onto the field again. She wasn't a target, she was a signal. That night, after the Friday night homecoming football game, the squad gathered again under the lights. The field radiated warmth. Zariah performed again on cue. Perfect. Such that everyone saw only crowd-pleasing excellence. She looked up at the stands, spotted her father leaning forward in the front row, eyes steady. That sight grounded her. She let the moment stretch. No cheers, no scowls, just mutual understanding between a father and daughter who had walked through fire, literal or otherwise, and emerged unbroken. Inside the post-game locker room, a hush fell. But this time, because everyone watched her, coaches asked if she'd be staining the bulletin board with MVP pictures. Teammates nodded. Brielle lingered at the door. For one breath, confrontation flickered. Brielle's lips set, her expression unreadable. Saria met it. No anger, just calm belief. Then Brielle turned and left. No door slammed. No fight. Just absence. Zariah exhaled. Moments later, Cassian slid up beside her. He nodded. Looks like your dad's name in the alumni records. That clipping stops here. He handed her a digital printout from school's newspaper. Note saying June 14, 2023. Online mention. No follow-up. They both understood what that meant. No support, no reckoning. They stayed together a while, fingered the space between truth and fear. Zariah let the lesson sink. The weapon they used against her, her mother's death, was rooted in silence. That silence had allowed injustice to thrive. Her next step would be the opposite. When she stepped out of the locker room under stadium lights, she carried the clipped newsprint with her. She didn't snap pictures. She didn't shout. She walked toward her father's car, slipping the paper inside the folder beneath her duffel. He didn't ask. He just drove. Wordless support. That had always been their unspoken pact. The car ride home was quiet except for the static hum of traffic. Zariah pressed her eyes against the window. She thought of her mother's warm smile before the fire, and of the cryptic message left in her locker. She thought of Brielle's simmering presence, and the fear hidden behind her calculated cruelty. She understood now. This game was about more than belonging. It was about truth, about digging up old injustices, and refusing to let them grow in silence again. She didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed while the world slumbered and planned. The clipped article would go to the superintendent, bundled with evidence of the stunt setup and security footage requests. She'd ask for clarity. Were they going to protect her, or let darkness win? She would ask them to stand for justice, not ignore the memory of this fight. Her father found her at 2 a.m., deep in her folder. He laid a hand on her shoulder, and she looked up at him. He left you an exit door, she said, heart thudding. Or a statement. He nodded, his face solemn. He felt the weight of legacy, of the battle that had torn their family apart. He trusted she would not repeat mistakes of silence. They spoke until dawn, about strategy, about reclaiming their names. Her mom's, hers, in the history buried in printed words. No shouting, no drama, just two quiet giants making a plan. At sunrise, Zariah rose with a new certainty. Homecoming week had been her crucible. She'd passed it. The stunt had been a victory. The whisper had cut deep, but the threat had given her purpose. Tomorrow she would begin the next phase of justice. No fireworks would erupt, no screaming would follow. But her presence, her truth, would speak louder than any spotlight ever could. Homecoming ended. Questions remained. But Zariah Cole walked into the new week with fire not in her eyes, but in her spine, and the knowledge that some truths are worth waking the world up to. Even the fluorescent lights in the old school library seemed tired, their hum low and heavy, as if they carried the weight of forgotten stories. Cassian led Zariah through the maze of dusty shelves, past rows of yellowed yearbooks and archived bulletins. He knew these stacks better than most, aware of hidden knowledge waiting to be uncovered. Zariah followed quietly, her heart steady but alert, clutching the clipping that had hit her locker late at night. This mission had become far bigger than a personal threat. Now it pulsed with history. They found a small wooden door labeled Alumni Records, tucked behind an aisle, propped open slightly. Inside, the air smelled of worn paper and time. Cassian hit the light switch, and a single bulb illuminated a narrow table strewn with binders. Nothing here was digitized. Everything depended on old alphabetic tabs and human memory. He pulled out the file labeled CE and skimmed pages until he found her mother's last name. His face tightened. Here, he said softly, revealing a folder labeled with Zariah's mother's name in precise script. Zariah swallowed, leaned forward. Inside, she found her mother's photo, young, fierce, and a court filing, thick with legal stamps and dates from June. Cassian thumbed through more pages. Correspondence, legal briefs, witness statements. The lawsuit challenged the school board for discriminatory scholarship practices, awards that repeatedly favored athletes on predominantly white teams, while ignoring equally or more qualified students of color. Scholarships denied. Awards withheld. Zariah's fingers trembled as she touched the paper. "Why isn't this public?" she whispered, voice low. Cassian pointed to the end of the binder. Blank pages. As if someone stopped filing mid-record. Court documents vanished. The lawsuit had been erased. They moved on to the next binder. SE. Here unfolded a systematic pattern. Cheer placements influenced by lineage. Yearbook citations skewed toward select families. Athletic recognition tied to socioeconomic status. A 2016 Star Award had gone to a white athlete with worse statistics than a black peer, yet the latter wasn't even nominated. Scholarship funds reserved for boosters' children. Zariah scrolled through, her breath tightening. This wasn't rumor, it was evident, and the missing lawsuit showed intention. Cassian paused over a note from an official from 2019. "Remember to drop cases that may open board to liability." They exchanged looks. Intentional suppression. Not mere oversight, but deliberate. Zariah closed her eyes for a moment, thinking of her mother. All she fought for. All she risked. She pressed a finger to the line on the note. "This is what they don't want anyone to know." They continued digging. Another folder dated 2017 detailed a similar pattern. Scholarship fund allocated to a minority student, rescinded because family background didn't fit community profile. That phrase cut through Zariah's chest like glass. They logged timestamps, page numbers, notes. Cassian typed furiously on his laptop at a narrow table, tracing metadata. "This is systemic," he said quietly. "Not just whispers. Proof right here." Zariah nodded, her mind racing. They needed broader validation, but this file room was their foundation. If they could leak segments, back them with the lawsuit, and the stunt footage, they could force transparency, even if slowly, bureaucratically. She placed her hand on her mother's legal folder, closed it carefully, and slid it back under the shelf. They had to remember this was public property, no trespass charges, but they needed discretion. Later they sat in the empty hallway outside the library, backs against lockers. Cassian opened his laptop and displayed snippets. A scanned flyer of Oscar Reed's scholarship denial, Mai Chen's yearbook omission, Zariah's mother's lawsuit summary. Each entry linked to the next. Reports showed the same pattern. The system favored continuity over equity. Zariah stared at the screen. "My mother saw it first," she said, voice low, "and risked her reputation to fight it. They erased her, and they tried to erase this truth." She closed her eyes. "They used my locker stunt, and that clipping to shake me. Not because I was guilty, but because I was dangerous." Cassian nodded. "And now we can be dangerous together, with facts." Their plan took shape. Validate the lawsuit through county court records, consult a local journalist, anonymize the report, and submit it to the school board and district attorney. If possible, schedule a public forum. But first, they needed to protect themselves. Cassian recommended creating encrypted copies, hiding digital keys in safe places. Zariah agreed. No heroics, just strategy. Before dusk, Zariah walked home past Maple Street, armored with purpose. At dinner, she placed the clippings and printed proof before her father. He studied each page in silence, folding notes, marking sections with post-its. He asked careful questions. Subpoenas filed, witnesses available, chance of revival. His experience gave weight to their findings, but he cautioned patience not to rush. "They'll attack us," he warned. "We need to be airtight." Zariah met his gaze. She understood that battle, learned from him. This fight wasn't about crowds or spectacle. It was about truth, persistence, resilience. Root cause over symptom. That night, Cassian texted, "Met with Mrs. Lockwood, former teacher. She'll testify. We move Monday." Zariah stared at the message, until the screen blurred. This was no longer a secret war. It was public reckoning in waiting. Under her covers, phone silent, she let the fatigue settle. Tomorrow would bring more digging. More questions, more enemies. But she clenched her fist softly beneath the sheets, and felt something fierce. Clarity. In Redwood Grove, old structures trembled when someone dared to re-examine their archives. The secret room had become a starting point. And Zariah, she wasn't just a student. She carried her mother's legacy, and her father's strength. There could be no turning back. When Shaquille Big Shaq O'Neal stepped onto Redwood Grove High's campus one crisp Thursday morning, there were no flashing cameras, no school police escorted entourage, no formal announcement. He wore a dark gray hoodie, jeans and white sneakers, unrecognizable to the casual eye, but fully intentional. He wanted to enter unnoticed. He walked past the metal detectors, past bustling students, past the trophy cases that once admired his daughter's mother, and into the hush that accompanied his unannounced presence. Not as a legend, but as a concerned father. Principal Conway spotted him near the main office. He recognized the face immediately. A retired NBA great, an iconic presence, but he had a job to protect the school's image. He stepped forward, voice balanced between surprise and protocol, and offered, "Mr. O'Neal, I wasn't expecting, how can I help?" Shaq smiled, a quiet gravity in his eyes. "I need to see you, now, please." He didn't demand. He didn't shout. His tone held a stillness that unsettled the principal. He followed. The door closed. No cell phones. No publicist. No grandstanding. Just hallway light and two men caught between protocol and conviction. Shaq began unhurriedly. "I'm here because my daughter's safe presence in this school has been weaponized against her, from whisper networks to planted cameras, to threats in her locker using memories of her mother's death." He paused, each word deliberate. Principal Conway sat straight, hands on the desk, his face growing paler. "I know you haven't designed this system to fail," Shaq continued, "but silence can feel as intentional as words." He spoke of Zariah's achievements, her flawless stunts, her volunteer hours, her leadership in classrooms. He spoke of the evidence. Cassian's dossier, the clip from the bleachers, photos of locker room slips, the lawsuit in the archives that vanished. Every accusation delivered calmly, definitively, without shouting or anger, like a litigator presenting a brief, not a celebrity demanding attention. Conway inhaled, fingertips brushing the edge of a framed school accreditation certificate. How did you get all of this?" he asked, voice tight. Shaq leaned forward. "My daughter and an ally compiled it. I'm here to ask what the district plans to do to ensure no student's path is derailed like this again." His words weren't threats. They were lighting in motion. No thunder, but unmistakable presence. Outside the office, a student hovered by the glass pane, the one who'd first seen Shaq walk in. She pulled out her phone and began recording. This wasn't media. It was witness. Shaq didn't notice. Conway shifted in his seat, his voice shaky. We have protocols for harassment and bullying. I can't comment on an ongoing investigation." He tapped a file from beneath his desk. "I've notified the board. District Council is reviewing. We will review policies, surveillance logs, confidentiality protocols." Shaq held up his hand, soft but authoritative. "I don't want evasions or platitudes. I want action that protects one person, and then every person after her. I want cameras removed from places they shouldn't record. I want anti-discrimination and empathy training for staff and students. I want transparency on that lawsuit, and institutional acknowledgement that what happened wasn't oversight." Conway swallowed. He called his secretary, typed furiously, closed his eyes. When he looked up, he said, Let me convene a meeting today. I'll present the evidence and discuss next steps." His voice trembled, but he had faced that quiet storm. No cameras, no fame, just responsibility. Shaq gave a brief nod. Stood. "Thank you," he said simply. He left the room, hoodie sliding low over his forehead, calm giant receding. The student outside stopped recording, fingers too slow, heart racing. In the hallway, students noticed. Teachers murmured. Snapchat lit up. A retired NBA champion just walked through the school's front doors. But no flashbulbs popped. No press crews lined up. Just whispers. "Did you see that? And is that Shaq?" That afternoon, the school board received the dossier. An emergency meeting was scheduled. A memo was circulated for staff and student body. New policies under review. Full cooperation requested. Open channels for reporting. The tone had changed. Silence, which had hidden cruelty, was being peeled away. Back at home, Shaq sat with Zariah and Cassian, tea warming in their hands. They spoke less of policy changes and more of roots. That justice doesn't flinch when a storm passes. That sometimes, stepping out quietly carries more force than public declarations. Zariah glanced at her father, knowing this moment carried more weight than any basket he ever made. He turned to her, gentle pride in his voice. You did this. You and Cassian. I just showed up to remind them silence isn't safety. That night, Redwood Grove slept uneasy, but more awake. The quiet giant had stepped out, not for fame, but for justice, and the ripple had begun. The morning campus felt fractured, as if the revelations hidden beneath the cheer smiles had awakened a slumbering earthquake. Students passed notes in hushed tones, hovering over phones in triangles of gossip and anticipation. Zariah typed nothing. She let silence speak for her. She walked through the hallways with Cassian by her side, their presence charged like electricity. The peaceful facade of Redwood Grove High had cracked, and the atmosphere was hungry for truth. That afternoon, the school newspaper, edited by Cassian's anonymous account Grove Watch, published the expose. The headline read, "Redwood Grove cheer-rigged. Voice recordings reveal captain's manipulation, racist remarks." Principal Conway's earlier promise echoed. Evidence would show up in indelible black and white. Attached were audio links of Brielle's voice, crisp and undeniable laughter spliced with cruel jokes about Zariah's skin tone. Instructions to edit out her stunts, ridiculing her mother's death, and calling her too dark to fit the vibe. A student gasp echoed through campus as teens clicked the incriminating clips on their phones. Within hours, the paper hit national attention. Local news outlets picked up the story. Talk radio buzzed. Hashtags formed. Truth in Redwood. Cheer captain exposed. Parents gathered in driveways with phones in hand, vetting the evidence, shaking their heads. Conversations erupted. Is that really Brielle? How did this go on so long? Are we teaching our kids enough about race and empathy? Inside the cheer locker room, the walls closed in. It was a trap of entitlement. Collapsing. Brielle's golden braid seemed brittle under the scrutiny. Parents hovered outside the doors like jurors. The cheer coach, Stevens, paced in circles. Her clipboard dropped, face pale. Conversations splintered. Some defended Brielle's stress, blamed Cassian for leaking. Others whispered apologies to Zariah. Brielle herself moved through the chaos with shaky poise. She addressed nobody, but the whispers trailed her. I'm sorry. It wasn't meant to be heard. But apology without accountability tasted false. The recording spoke louder than regret. The once infallible captain lost her footing in a school that had built her throne. The evening school board meeting was historic. Overflow seats filled the packed auditorium. Students crammed into aisles. Parents leaned in from balconies. Cameras framed the stage. Principal Conway sat alongside district officials, sternly silent. Cassian and Zariah watched face to face, their evidence in print. Brielle and her parents sat to one side, stiff-backed, expressions schooled into calm. The meeting opened with the school board chair's measured tone. We are here to address the allegations published today regarding the cheerleading team and school culture at Redwood Grove High. A pause. The hush cottoned and stretched until a mother's sob ruptured it into raw sound. My daughter was hurt, someone said. Others nodded. The board listened. Cassian's article had sparked accountability. Now others stood to speak. Black cheer alumni who had felt overlooked. Students of color who faced similar whispers years before. Teachers who remembered politics undermining fair award distribution. The library lawsuit from years past was resurrected in testimonies. Files from the secret room were surfaced, projected onto screens. The weight of evidence was undeniable. Pattern and culture, not an isolated event. Brielle stood to address them, tears glistening though her face tried to remain calm. Why, this isn't who I want to be, she began. Her voice quavered. I never meant for it to sound like that. I got carried away. But her laughter in the recordings interspersed with insensitive cracks. It haunted the auditorium. Many accused her of tone-deaf apologies. One parent asked loudly, if you didn't mean them, why did you say them? Her parents' faces flushed. An attorney representing them took notes, eyes fixed on board members, ready to intervene. Town parents rose in divisions, some defending the community's image, some calling for zero tolerance. They demanded policy changes, mandatory bias training, re-evaluation of awards and scholarships. Others raised concerns about due process and privacy. Principal Conway listened, acknowledging that he had failed to recognize the signs early, that silence had enabled harm. National reporters buzzed around interviews. Cassian answered composedly. We merely provided evidence of a pattern that existed. Our goal is not revenge. It's accountability. Zariah spoke to a local news clip, voice steady. I didn't do this for dramatic effect. I did it because I deserve to be here. And so did every student who felt invisible. The board closed the meeting with promises: a full investigation, revised policy on recording consent and privacy, mandatory diversity and empathy training for staff and team leaders, scholarships unlocked for deserving students not tied to lineage, a public transparency portal to track complaints in progress. Still, many walked out uneasy. The optics felt hopeful, but implementation would take time. That night, in Carter Park behind the school, Zariah and Cassian paused beneath the lights from social media screens. Cassian's phone showed thousands of reposts. "You did this," Cassian said quietly. "You and your mom." Zariah flicked the clip reminder of her mother's activism into her jacket. "We did it." Their pact held firm: truth over violence, clarity over chaos. But the fallout wasn't done. Brielle's parents issued a statement. Our daughter was under extreme pressure, and their attorney hinted at a defamation suit. Guilt by association became their defense. They targeted Cassian's anonymity and the school's transparency policies. Social media erupted. Presume innocence, cyberbully alert, cancel culture fight. The community was fracturing. One unexpected voice rose: Coach Stevens. She'd remained silent during the board meeting, until her turn. She revealed that her own hesitations prevented her from calling it out sooner. Fear of backlash, pressure from boosters. It was systemic. She apologized publicly and pledged to step down from captain selection duties. The admission surprised many, shifting blame from Brielle alone to an entire enabling structure. Some parents cheered, others glared. Days later, Brielle retreated from public life. Apologies posted online rang hollow to town eyes. Her Instagram deleted. The cheer squad reshuffled. The community began healing, slowly. Zariah remained steady in her role, more respected than ever. Still, she carried layered grief and guarded triumph. The quiet girl had triggered a tsunami. In the weeks that followed, Cassian signed his piece under his name. He enrolled in a local journalism mentorship. He spoke at assemblies about racism in schools. Zariah continued her studies, her volunteering, her practice, each move deliberate. She didn't seek the spotlight. She held a presence that was less about fame and more about rooted dignity. Then someone familiar spoke up at the final school assembly before winter break. Brielle's assistant coach, Mr. Knight. He stepped forward and said simply, "I allowed it to happen. I coached silence. I am sorry." The admission silenced the gym. It was one more vital fracture in a crumbled empire. Then he ended, "We will do better, because truth is heavier than pride." The town watched. A new cheer coach was hired, a woman whose credentials spoke in years spent championing inclusion. Scholarships were reopened. A small memorial plaque dedicated to Zariah's mother was commissioned in front of the gym. For those who stood when they thought no one was watching, it read, Redwood Grove was no longer the same place. It was better than it was. It still had work, but it had begun. Zariah and Cassian walked the corridor toward their next class, the mood unusually unguarded. A student of color offered Zariah a nod. Another said, "I'm sorry this happened to you." She replied simply, "It happened because of you." She acknowledged the collective failure and the collective responsibility for change. She thought back to the first tremors, hushed whispers, hidden cameras, threats in her locker, and now to this moment: clarity, accountability, reevaluation. Truth had done what threat and exclusion could not, and it had done so without violence, without spectacle, only witness, strategy, and endurance. In Redwood Grove High's new story, the fall of one empire, a whisper network, a captain, an empire, translated into uplift for many others. The news cameras would leave, the hashtags would fade, but the policies, the stories, the memorial plaque, the statements, they would remain. And Zariah? She stood taller than ever, not as a hero, but as a person who had refused to be invisible. She had stepped from the wings into the light, and that light was now large enough for everyone who once feared their turn was over. The cheer captain had fallen, and a new chapter was just beginning. On a quiet Monday morning, Redwood Grove High's gym stood veiled in smoke. Flames had licked the rafters in the early hours, charcoal tongues that left the boards warped and the bleachers shorn. No one claimed responsibility, but investigators whispered, arson behind sealed doors. For Zariah, watching the charred remnants of her team's practice space felt like witnessing a soul stripped raw. The gym had been more than wood and nails. It was site of her triumphs, her battles, and the place where she reclaimed belonging. Now it lay in ruin, its ashes echoing a message no one could misinterpret. This fight was far from over. That afternoon, as students passed perimeter caution tape, Zariah met Cassian by the rubble's edge. He slid his hand into hers, steady, unwavering. Together they traced the burned lines, searched for scorch patterns, or suspicious accelerants, but no clear source, no idling gas can, just charred ruin and questions lingering in the charred air. The fire extinguished more than the physical structure. It ignited renewed suspicion. This wasn't just policy or prejudice. It was fear, masked as destruction. In the aftermath, the superintendent announced school delays. The scholarship showcase scheduled for that weekend would proceed in the auditorium, a temporary stage on borrowed ground. But the tone had shifted. Where before there was hope, now there was caution. Where spectators once expected polish, now they braced for scrutiny. In this suspended moment, the story's heartbeat matched the gym's pulse, wounded, but still present. Meanwhile, behind closed courtroom doors downtown, another fire had sparked. The long-buried lawsuit filed by Zariah's late mother against the district had been reopened. What was once dismissed as old news surged to the foreground. Zariah's mother, Marisol Cole, had challenged decades of inequity, scholarship denials, discriminatory team selections, hush culture. The suit had vanished under bureaucratic fog in 2018, but now it was reanimated. Big Shaq appeared in court that afternoon. He shed his hoodie for a crisp blazer and stepped to the stand in a hushed room. No cheering crowds, no camera crews, just murmurs and waiting. He spoke in measured tones, voice low, with sorrow and demand. He told of Marisol's courage, a single mother confronting institutional inertia, and how she had paid with her life, her legacy swallowed by complacency. He spoke of Zariah, how she inherited her mother's fire, but had been forced into shadow because silence is cheaper than change. He paused, gaze steady at the panel. "I failed her," he said softly, but the words struck like gavel. "I thought I could protect her with quiet. I thought if I stayed out of it, it would be easier. But silence enabled cruelty." He laid out the evidence: suppressed lawsuit, buried cheerboard recordings, gym sabotage. The courtroom hung on every syllable. He spoke of justice, not as punishment, but as restoration. His final words: "I won't let red tape take her future like it took my wife." Outside, protest banners waved, "Justice for Cole," and "Rebuild Hope." Inside, judges deliberated. The heritage of a burnt gym found its counterpoint in a mother's unfinished fight. Evidence coupled with testimony, voices long buried reemerged. The district faced financial penalties, mandated policy change, and public reckoning. That evening, as the community watched from rooftops and living room windows, the scholarship showcase unfolded in the auditorium. It opened not with fanfare, but with acknowledgement, an apology from the superintendent, a moment of silence for Marisol, and a pledge to rebuild the gym stronger. Zariah stepped forward, head lifted above the crowd. No megawatt smile, no dramatic flourish, just a poised, determined presence. She performed flawlessly, each motion a reclamation of space, each cheer a testament to her inheritance. At the end, when she raised her hands, the audience rose with her in reverent applause. Parents, students, the press, even a few tearful gazes from those who'd once been silent. After the showcase, Zariah found her father backstage. He wrapped her in a hug so tight it seemed to hold every fragment of pain and healing. He whispered, "You carried her burden and mine," voice muffled against her hair. She pressed back, steady and full, reply unspoken but understood. With the gym under construction, policy reforms in motion, and the court's verdict pending, Redwood Grove was finally in motion itself. The scars of the fire, the reopened lawsuit, and a father's truth had fused into a new discourse, one that refused to let silence smolder in corners. Zariah watched the auditorium empty. The lights dimmed, and felt the weight of history shift under her feet. She carried her mother's name, her father's lessons, and her own fiercely earned right to stand tall. Her fight had stretched across charred wood, dusty archives, and courtroom benches. Now it lived in every student who stepped forward, in policies rewritten, in a rebuilt gym stone by stone. No one had to cheer. The quiet had sufficed. The morning air hung crisp with anticipation, as the grand opening of the Redwood Grove Community Gymnasium brought together families, teachers, and alumni, all gathered beneath banners hand-painted with slogans like "Rebuilding Together" and "Strength in Truth." The gym rose from the ashes of its predecessor, not with frills or official pomp, but with a raw, genuine energy, donation bricks, volunteer paintbrushes, and hometown pride laid brick by brick in solidarity. The wood floors gleamed beneath platform lights, reflecting new beginnings rather than records of the past. Today was Zariah's final showcase, not just of skill but of progress, of hope, of community rewriting its own narrative. Zariah stepped onto the court in plain white sneakers and a simple athletic top. Gone were the polished uniforms of competitive squads. Today was about transparency, about vulnerability cloaked in presence. Her name had been spoken 1,000 times in meetings, news segments, and activist forums, but here she was introducing herself again. This time not as Big Shaq's daughter, not as cheer captain, but as Zariah Cole, a force of integrity and grace. She caught sight of Cassian near the scorer's table, holding a notebook filled with handwritten congratulations. He gave her a small thumbs up. His presence reminded her, this was journalism, without anonymity, purpose driving each word written on those pages. A community cheer rose to signal the beginning. The routine unfolded, synchronized jumps, basket tosses, spinning lifts, all executed with refined precision and emotional resonance. Zariah's eyes were fixed on the edge of the stage, where her father stood quietly beside the superintendent and the new school board members. He'd traded his blazer for a button-down and jeans, a father's dress code for a grounded celebration. When Zariah soared through her final toss, the board looked up, noticing for the first time how this daughter of theirs had carried not just athletic prowess, but the fight to rebuild a broken system. Behind her, the other girls, some friends, some new teammates, circled in respectful applause. It felt like a passing of the torch to a generation who would stand up earlier, speak louder, and be seen holistically, not just for their achievements, but as people. As the routine ended, Zariah dropped to her knees in the center court, arms raised toward overhead lights. The applause that followed wasn't engineered by pom-poms. It came from hearts who knew this was more than a performance. It was a reclaiming. After the echo of cheers subsided, the superintendent took a step forward. He spoke of accountability, systemic change, and the path ahead. He announced the school board had restructured. New members pledged equity, diversity, and transparency as guiding principles. Brielle Hastings, who'd once dominated cheers and whispers, had transferred schools. Her departure was not celebrated, it was acknowledged as part of healing. Even she, silently seated in a corner of the bleachers, seemed to shrink before the weight of her absence. Then came Cassian's moment. As a representative of Grovewatch and a budding reporter, he was recognized for earning a National High School Journalism Award. He received a plaque and spoke briefly, dedicating the honor to Zariah Cole and Marisol Cole's legacy. Turning to Zariah, he said, "Truth finds light, the only way forward is together." His words resonated deeply. He had uncovered injustice and she had carried it bravely into the open. The ceremony concluded with a surprise announcement: the founding of the Marisol Cole Scholarship Fund, to support students from marginalized backgrounds pursuing leadership in arts, sports, and activism. Zariah watched as checks were signed, names engraved, and a legacy formally passed to future generations. As the building emptied, the real community day began. Potlucks, pickup basketball games, laughter climbing above the honks, and cheers echoing against the new gym walls. Zariah found her father by the retractable bleachers. He lifted a bottle of water like a silent toast. She handed him a plain paper cup, and he clinked it to hers. No words, just pride. He finally said quietly, "You changed the story." She nodded. "We did, Dad. We did." He smiled, an expression built from victory, relief, and hard-won peace. Not the shine of fame, but the warmth of understanding. Sunlight filtered through the windows as community members drifted out, handshakes turning into conversations, conversations moving into new friendships, and restorative connections. Redwood Rewritten was no tagline, it was a living testament. And Zariah, she lingered at center court, palms pressed to the floor, fingers closing around every inch of wood beneath her, feeling grounded yet lifted. Tonight she would sleep soundly. Tomorrow she would return to classes, to practice, to volunteer work. But in her veins was something more lasting than titles. She carried structural shifts, policy that now had to follow action, and stories ready to empower others who faced darkness. As the gym lights dimmed, the final scene belonged to her father. As the building cleared, he stood for a moment beneath the rafters once scorched by fear, now radiating possibility. His place beside his daughter wasn't a photo op, It was shared history, navigated with courage and conviction. Redwood had changed. Not overnight, not easily, but because one girl refused to bow, one journalist refused to remain silent, and a community refused to bury its truth. And in that shared moment, beneath the new ceiling, they all witnessed the story's transformation, one built on honesty, resilience, and collective strength. The gym lights blinked off. The lows and highs of the past months faded into memory, leaving behind a space ready for the futures yet to come. Zariah Cole turned on her heel and walked out with the others. No final bows, no dramatic exits, just steps forward, grounded in purpose. If this story stirred something in you, don't just scroll. Share it at your dinner table, your classroom, your boardroom. Ask what stories aren't being told in your community. Because truth doesn't move without people willing to carry it. Be that person. Start something real.